One of the things we would normally do in the summer term is to introduce you to some Latin literature. That's going to be harder to do seeing as we're closed, but we're going to give it a try anyway. So I've sent you this booklet which contains some text by a man called Pliny the Younger. Your literature component of the GCSE is divided into two chunks, a verse chunk and a prose chunk. So we're going to start with the prose chunk, of which there are actually two extracts. This one by Pliny the Younger and another one by a historian called Tacitus. We're going to start with this one because it's a shorter one, so hopefully that might make things a little bit easier for us. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what it is and what we want you to do with it. So let's start with what it is. It's by a man called Pliny. You might have heard of the name Pliny. There are two famous Plinies in the Roman world. This one, Pliny the Younger, and his uncle Pliny the Elder, who wrote a natural history. They're easily confused. Pliny the Younger was a prolific letter writer, which is one of the things that he's most famous for. I've also given you this lovely introduction here, so feel free to read about him in your own time as well. But as you can see, the text that we've got here is a letter. There are 9 books of Pliny's letters covering a variety of different topics, one of which comes from his time as governor of Bithynia. So he was a well-off Roman man, an aristocrat of sorts, a magistrate, and as I say, a governor as well. But he's most famous for his letters, which give us an insight into the Roman world. He's writing in the late 1st century AD and the early 2nd century AD. So he's an imperial Roman writer. This letter itself is addressed, as you can see here, to a man called Calvisius. There he is. So Gaius Pliny greets his dear Calvisius, and is a letter about a man called Regulus. Thus the title of the piece is Regulus. Regulus seems to have been not a very nice man, who was an informer under the Emperor Domitian, was apparently a very good orator as well, a very good speech maker, so he was clearly a well-renowned politician, but had a bit of a nasty side as well. He appears in Pliny's work on a couple of occasions, and is talked about in not flattering terms, shall we say. The purpose of this letter is to talk about Regulus in the context of legacy hunting. You can see here this name, Verania. This letter talks about Regulus visiting Verania and trying to wheedle his way into her will. Legacy hunting is when an individual befriends somebody who's very old or on the point of death and tries to get them to leave them something, preferably money, after their death. It's obviously not a very pleasant pursuit, but is something which Regulus seems to have engaged in. Anyway, so how does this work? Well, the point is that usually in class we would go through this. So we'd take a chunk of text together. So here's a piece of text, here's the beginning of the letter. We would work through it as a group, translating it as we went, and then afterwards you would write your own translation of it, and then you would use that when the time came to revise for the exam and prepare yourself to comment on the letter, to translate bits of it, to discuss the style of it, and so on and so forth. But the first stage is really just to try and get a translation down on paper. If you're in the Latin and Greek class particularly, this is going to be quite taxing, because obviously you've got twice as many texts to do, so we really do need to make a start now. So I'm hoping that by sending you this and by producing these videos, you'll be able to walk through it with me, get a good understanding, and produce a good translation in your own time. So I hope that's given you a bit of an introduction, and the next video I'll actually start walking through a piece of text with you. Okay.